Yabba dabba doo. Hey, it's Carlos Watson. I'm back. The show, I hope you're enjoying it. We're trying to do something special for you here. We always promise you we're going to bring you the most interesting people, and they're going to vary. You'll see an author like Roxane Gay. You'll see an NFL quarterback like Baker Mayfield. You never know who you'll see on the show, but you'll always see people who are trying to change the world just a little bit. If you're liking this, think about subscribing, think about commenting. Definitely tell a friend, because there's more good stuff every single day. Today, we're having a little bit of trouble by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, JGL. You know him from Third Rock from the Sun. I liked him in 500 Days of Summer. You may have loved the Snowden piece. He's got an awesome new film out on Netflix. Get ready for this. Try it. Tell me a little bit about your new film, The Trial of Chicago 7.
You watch it, it feels like you're watching something about today. A lot of young people were against the Vietnam War. So they came to protest in Chicago, and it ended in violence. Did the protesters cause the violence, or did the police cause the violence?
When you look back at the story, where were some of those luck moments?
Third Rock from the Sun is one of the first things that comes to mind.
What are you doing lollygagging about?
Lollygagger. They really looked out for me.
What have you learned about love?
I'm not used to talking about that in a public forum.
How are you thinking either about your own life or about where we're going as a country?
Ooh, man, I fluctuate. You know, I have my optimistic days and my pessimistic days.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good. What do people call you? What do you like to be called?
Oh, I'm not too picky. So people call me Joe or Joseph, Joey, Giuseppe, Jose, all of the above.
How did you decide to do the three names?
It was not my decision. My parents are pretty progressive, and you know, my mom was active in the women's movement in the 60s and 70s, and you know, I think just the question being, why should a woman give up her name and the man not give up his, and why should a child only be named after the man and not the woman?
And I saw that your mom ran for Congress at one point. Is that right?
Yeah, speaking of being progressive, yeah, actually it was new back then, called the Peace and Freedom Party, and their main platform was trying to end the Vietnam War. My dad was an investigative journalist. They actually met working at a pretty progressive public radio station in Los Angeles called KPFK, which is still going strong. And yeah, it's in my blood, I guess. The left is in my blood.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt is an award-winning actor who's had a lot of pivotal roles. His latest project is The Trial of the Chicago 7. It's based on a true story that happened over 50 years ago, but is arguably relevant to what's happening today with recent protests. Joseph portrays prosecutor Richard Schultz, who argued that the defendants were violent and wanted to destroy the U.S. government. Joseph, tell me a little bit about your new film, because it was also in another tumultuous period, you know, The Trial of Chicago 7. For people who don't know and don't remember that trial, will you refresh them and then tell me a little bit about what you learned in making that film, if anything?
What's funny is this is a story about 1968, but when you watch it, it feels like you're watching something about today.
When you came to Chicago, were you hoping for a confrontation with the police? I'm concerned you have to think about it.
Give me a moment, would you, friend? I've never been on trial for my thoughts before.
A lot of young people were against the Vietnam War, and they wanted to protest at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago that the Democratic Party should nominate an anti-war candidate, that the American people should be able to vote between two presidential candidates, one being supporting the war and one being for ending the war. So they came to protest in Chicago, and it ended in violence. And there was a lot of debate onto what was the source of that violence. Did the protesters cause the violence, or did the police cause the violence? And in hindsight, historically, the evidence pretty solidly points to the fact that it was the police that started those riots. But at the time, the American government wanted to put 8 prominent activists on trial for conspiracy to start a riot. The reason the movie's called Chicago 7 is because some people disagreed that there should have been 8 people on trial because the 8th person was the head of the Black Panthers, Bobby Seale, who had never even met the 7 other men who were allegedly the conspirators. And they thought that the American government was putting Bobby Seale, sort of lumping him in with these other activists in order to paint a more dangerous looking picture and leverage the racism that is all too present today and certainly was then.
Overruled.
I am being denied right
Mr.
now
Seale,
my constitutional
will you be quiet?
right for
Will
legal
you?
representation.
Will you be quiet?
It got to the point Bobby Seale, the head of the Black Panthers, had a gag in his mouth and was tied to his chair in an American courtroom. That's not what our country is supposed to be about. Our government can do some terrible things and has recently. And that's not unpatriotic to point that out. In fact, that's the greatest patriotism, to point that out when you're an American.
Do you think as a result of all the Black Lives Matter conversation, are you yourself hearing more open and productive conversation around race and racial change in Hollywood? Like, is it actually starting to filter into conversations that you're a part of or not yet?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's much more prevalent than it was, and it should have been prevalent for all this time. And it was. I mean, I think it even before the tragedies of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the recent round of protests, there have been more conversations. Since what happened in Ferguson, there have been more conversations as we've gone. But I do think that, yes, I think this year, this sort of reckoning that's happening in our country is definitely being heard by Hollywood. Now, there's also a desire to try to fix the problem quickly, when I don't think it's as simple as let's make sure that, there are, this percentage more people of color appearing in movies now than there were. I mean, I think that's good. That's a good step forward, but it's not that simple. And I feel like sometimes the conversation gets reduced to that.
Joseph is definitely a product of his parents' progressive influence. In 2004, he started Hit Record, an open online community for creative collaboration.
It's been really wonderful seeing this community that started so long ago and has been such a big part of my life for all this time, kind of rise to this dark occasion and provide something that a lot of people are needing.
Do you feel like you have changed a lot over the last year, or while it has been an unusual time, you still in many ways are the person I would have met a year ago, 5 years ago?
I always feel like there's both, because in a way I feel like I'm still the same person I was when I was 12, and then in a lot of ways I'm completely different than I was when I was 12. This year's been so extraordinary, and I think I'm only beginning to understand the ways that it has impacted me. I think probably I think we've all together undergone and are continuing to undergo some real trauma. I hate to be melodramatic about it, but I think we're probably all suffering some PTSD, or you can take off the P because it's not post-traumatic yet. We're still being traumatized by this pandemic. And I think I've definitely been affected by it. I think my kids, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old. I think they're definitely impacted by it. And, that makes me sad, to be honest. And we do our very, very best to try to keep it positive and find the silver linings. My main focus throughout this whole lockdown has been gratitude. And that's not entirely new. That's something my parents taught me, but living in quarantine has brought it to the forefront for certain.
All right, this one's for the heroes. And I don't mean actors playing superheroes, real heroes.
We've been forced to slow down, have our plans that we were in the middle of, one thing after another. Many of those got disrupted. I just found myself at home with my family, and frankly, in many ways, at first, like frustrated that the things I was in the middle of got interrupted, but had to quickly come to a place where like, I have nothing to be frustrated about.
Be fearless! We can do it! I believe in you! We can do it faster!
Our home is the training ground for her dreams policy. Insure carefully. Dream fearlessly.
If he had had his way, nobody who did not know how to catch a fish would be allowed to disgrace a fish by catching it.
And how did the acting start? Like, I hear your grandfather was in it, and but was this you who was the one who had the love for it, or was it just being in Los Angeles as a kid and it was kind of in the water and maybe friends, or how did you jump into it?
It was kind of all of the above. I think being in Los Angeles was a big part of why it ended up being a professional thing. When I was a kid, I just loved it. You know, I would play pretend, and when I was in community theater, one of the kids that was also in the community theater was going on auditions for commercials and stuff, and their manager asked my mom if I would want to do it, and I remember the conversation. Actually, it was in the kitchen, and I remember her kind of kneeling down and, you know, coming down onto my level and talking to me about it and saying, like, you know how you see some kids sometimes on TV and stuff, would you want to try out to do that sometimes? And I was really like, yeah, I would love to do that. And it was always something really fun for me. And the other important thing to say is my parents never pressured me to do it. As encouraging as they were always saying, like, if you ever want to stop doing this, you can just stop. You don't have to do this. You know, we'll support you to do it as long as you're having fun doing it. But you don't have to. And I consider that really lucky.
God, if there is a God, maybe you could help him win a little. I'd really, really like a family. Holy cow!
How do you do that?
When you look back at the story, where were some of those luck moments that, if you were doing kind of a case study on your career, you'd be like, that was a good moment and that was a good moment? Like, where are some of those?
There's Third Rock from the Sun is one of the first things that comes to mind.
It's marijuana. Oh.
This whole time we've been eating her slop and you're a damn gourmet!
No, it's pot. I swear, I smoke it with my friends. I love to toke up on the fat daddies. Dude.
Hugely formative experience for me. I started that show when I was 13. We finished when I was 19. And I happened to get picked to be on this show with incredibly kind, healthy, smart, generous people. And there are a lot of TV shows out there today and throughout the history of television that probably wouldn't have been such healthy environments to grow up on and have your adolescence on.
What are you doing lollygagging about?
Lollygagger.
Here, get off the phone.
See me in my office.
Get him an office. Hey, I notice you're all drinking from separate cups. 1 cup per group.
We're trying to run a business here.
Not a water drinking factory.
They really looked out for me, and they were really intent upon, you know, the kid of the set not getting maladjusted, and you know, they really took a mentorly, familial role in my life.
Who did you look up to as you were developing your craft, and who do you, now that you have had the opportunity to be in it now for, 30 years, like, who do you admire as a professional yourself?
John just taught me so much about what it is to be an actor and an artist and a professional and a responsible human being and a kind human being and a leader. And that was lucky that I ended up getting that part instead of a part on some other show with a less kind or well-adjusted leader as John Lithgow. Like, when I was 12, I went through a Dustin Hoffman thing where I just watched all of his movies. I've always been such a huge fan of his. Nowadays, there's plenty of artists I admire. One artist I admire so much is Donald Glover in particular, because he's such a brilliant actor, and also, you know, he's created Atlanta. I think is one of the greatest, not just TV shows, but like whether you want to compare it to a show or a movie or whatever. I just think that's some of the greatest motion picture storytelling that's going on right now.
I don't know what I want. I know this arrangement works for me.
And then he's also a great musician, and he just, the way that he builds his career, I love that he's not on social media. I really admire that. And just his career is really, really inspiring to me. So he's a good example.
Joseph, so one of the things that we always talk about on the show is how do people go about dreaming fearlessly? If you were going back and you were going to tell young Joseph Gordon-Levitt, hey, here's what's going to surprise you while you're in the game, what are 2 or 3 things that are going to surprise him that really would make you kind of step back and kind of go, oh?
That's a cool question. All right, I'm gonna give a probably a not sexy answer. But if I were gonna talk to my younger self, one of the things I would say is, you know, what's gonna help you most is nothing you learned from all the great actors that you've had the opportunity to work with, but actually something you learned from your dad, which is just a really strong work ethic, that you don't give up and you keep doing it. And even when it sucks, and even when it's boring, and even when it's mundane, or even when it's disappointing, you keep doing it, and you keep a positive attitude, and you are good to people, and you don't get frustrated with people, and you show up on time, and you're reliable, and you do the things you say you're gonna do. You're a grown-up about this. It's not fun to hear that, like, you know, being an artist doesn't sound like the job of a grown-up. It sounds like you get to be a kid and play pretend all the time for a living, and there is some of that. That's true. But the people I think who are really, really good at what they do and stay good at what they do are grown-ups about it, and are all those things that apply to whatever professional avenue you're trying to go down. Artists are no exception. Be a professional, be a solid grown-up about what you're doing. Again, I warned you, it's not sexy. You know, everyone wants to hear that, like, all you have to do is just follow your dreams and like follow your heart. But like, that's not all. That's important. You do, but the other stuff is also important.
Hey, you know, one of the things that we talk a lot about on the show as well is love. What have you learned about love?
Oh man, I'm not used to talking about that in a public forum. I mean, of course, when I first think of love, I think of, you know, the people I say I love you to all day, every day, or, you know, my family. For my own personal preference, I like to keep that pretty private, but I do think that there's a love that I think I've found. I don't hold on to it all the time, every day, but I try to beyond my family, for, you know, just people, for the whole enchilada, all of us. I moved to New York City, where you're on top of people a lot, and you're just interacting with so many people. You just walk down the street and you're just around hundreds and hundreds of people all the time. And I feel like that love is so important to my happiness and my like drive to do things. Is if I didn't feel a certain amount of love for kind of the human race as a whole, if I only had love for the few people close to me, I might be throwing the middle finger up to the rest of the world and be doing a lot of things pretty differently.
What do you think you see ahead? What do you hope as you look out over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years? How are you thinking either about your own life or about where we're going as a country? How do you think about that?
Ooh, man, I fluctuate. You know, I have my optimistic days and my pessimistic days, to be really honest. My nature is optimistic. I tend to remain pretty optimistic, especially in the long term. I feel like, if you're talking about the next couple of months, I think we're in for a rough ride.
You've already fired most of them because they did a good job.
Some people don't
well,
do a good
here's
job.
With you,
go ahead.
say,
You get the wait a minute. You get the final word, Mr.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown.
I hate to like go on record saying it because I was wrong before, but I do think Trump's going to lose. I think that's going to be a really good thing for the country, but I also think that it's going to be really divisive. I think he's going to sow as much discord and division as he possibly can. I don't think he's going to make it peaceful and a healthy transition. And I think, leaving even him aside or even leaving politics aside, there's this cultural divide in our country that makes me really sad that we've divided ourselves into these us and them camps. I see folks on the left being, harboring animosity and being reductive towards people on the right, as much as I see people on the right harboring animosity and being reductive towards people on the left. I don't know how we get past that other than I do oftentimes get encouraged looking at what younger people are up to. I do believe in a positive direction for online culture, even though I think we need some big course correction. There are some big problems in the way that online culture works right now. That's something I think about a lot because, I started an online community years ago called Hit Record, where we make art together online in a communal, collaborative way. And that's hugely nourishing to me. And that's one example of many examples where people are being productive and collaborative online and not just kind of one-upping each other and tearing each other down.
Joseph, if you don't mind, I'd love to do a 60-second rapid fire round. Do you mind if I hit you with 2 or 3 quick ones? What's your favorite movie that you've been in of all time?
Looper. I don't know. Looper was amazing.
Your favorite book?
10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now by Jaron Lanier.
Ooh. Country you've loved to visit that you haven't visited yet?
Senegal.
And if you went back to Columbia and picked back up your studies, what course would you want to take?
Chemistry.
Surprise me. Hey, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I entered a fan, I exit a bigger fan. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Really, really good to talk to you, Carlos. Thanks.
Be safe, be well. Thanks again.
All right, you too, man. Cheers.
Bye-bye. JGL, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Hey, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Been a big fan of his since 500 Days of Summer. Really enjoyed him in the Edward Snowden piece. That was strong. It was intriguing to me about his hesitation around privacy. I wonder if that's some of the Edward Snowden effects. I'll never know. I love what he had to say about the grind, about the hustle, about working hard even when it's not clearly obvious. He talked about luck, and I appreciate him for that. You know what he didn't maybe say enough is how important I think his parents were to this journey. I think having the kind of mom and dad he did, something tells me that they were a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more hands-on, made sure he got into a good situation. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, I hope you'll do all the right things. I hope you'll subscribe, hope you'll tell a friend, and maybe even try the podcast. It's money. See you soon. Hey, tune into the Carlos Watson Show. It's like no other. You're going to enjoy it every weekday on YouTube.